Hello everyone. So in this video I'm going to show you all the basic Generate modifiers in Blender. So let's get started. First modifier is the array. The array creates multiple copies of the thing we have depending on which axis you want it to. So for instance now it's an X. So let's make it larger and we add count and it just keeps adding more cubes. Now until you apply it, you can modify the first cube and it modifies everything. So as you can see here, let's do some random things. And as you can see, it can modify everything. You can make it go into a line, and you can even do it, make it have a curve, but we'll see that in a second with another modifier. So this Generate modifier is a very useful modifier, as you can see, because when you have something that repeats, you don't have to duplicate it and move it around all the time. Alright, let's get rid of this. Get another cube. Next modifier, Bevel. Bevel adds a bevel, so essentially it adds more lines and smooths out all the lines of the object. You can add more bevels, and segments means how many lines will be made. So let's say 3 lines and by 0.12 meters each. The angle is how acute it can be made, but usually just you don't care about that, just leave it at 0. So now you can either change the shape to make it outwards or inwards with the shape. And geometry, you can change these, but most of the time nothing changes. However, when you change this one, the inner, sharp or arc, it changes how the corners are being made. And shading is not important. So now if I apply this with Control A and go into edit mode, you see it added 3 lines on all edges by the amount we specified. So this is now a smoother cube. Alright, next one. We've got the Boolean. Boolean allows you essentially to connect different pieces. So let's get rid of this. Let's make a second cube. And now I'm gonna rotate this cube by 45 degrees. And I'm gonna make it smaller and place it inside this one. So now, let's say we want to connect these ones. I'm gonna add the Boolean modifier, and I'm gonna select the object I want to connect. So this one. Now the difference is gonna basically erase any geometry that is overlapping and keep everything else, making it one piece. However, this is not a joined object. They're 2 separate objects. So in this case, it's just going to cut out a piece of this cube to the shape that the other cube touches it in. So let's see what that is. Let's just apply it. Now move this cube, and you see there's now an indentation on this cube that has the shape of this cube where it was touching it. Now we can use the Boolean modifiers. First of all, let's check the other ones. Union essentially just will make another piece. So it takes all the shared and non-shared pieces of both objects and just duplicates them essentially and makes them one mesh. So if we apply this one and then move this cube, you see that another cube has spawned here, and it's inside as well. I don't know if I can show you the inside. Sorry, there we go. So it's now connected these 2 pieces without destroying the original, and you now have the conjoined space. And if we do intersect, it basically takes only the common pieces of both objects and makes them into a new mesh. So if we apply this one, you'll see that now we only have the part that was touching on both pieces as a piece. Now what else you can do is, when you have these objects, okay, now let's check another modifier, build. Build is a pretty cool modifier. It's mostly used for animation. You see now it disappeared. But what it does is, let's actually add some more geometry here so we can show better. Let's just randomly add more geometry. Okay, so now I'm gonna add the build modifier. Now it disappeared. What happens is, it starts when you click play animation, and the frames start going by. Individual faces will start showing up. So you select the start frame. Let's select on frame 5, for instance, and for 100 frames. And what happens is, it's gonna start when I hit play. It's gonna gradually build this. So this is like cool if you want to make like an animation of like, I don't know, nanotechnology forming. So you could make like a suit over someone and then hit the build modifier, and in the animation you can start it and it's going to gradually appear on someone, on the body, which is pretty cool. If you have imagination, you can do whatever you want with this. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. Next one is the Decimate. Decimate basically just makes less geometry on the object without losing the shape of the object. So ratio 1 keeps it as is. Let's say 0.1 and enter. Now if it's too low, it's gonna destroy this the object. So what we're gonna do is just add a lot of geometry here, like an insane amount of geometry, let's say this for a single cube, which is not necessary. And then we go and we decimate it 0.1. And okay, it still messes it up. Maybe this was a bad example. Let's try a different shape. So I'm gonna add a sphere. No, let's add a cube again, but let's just make it more, have different stuff. So let's just make this small, and add this and this and this, and keep the shape. Let's go down, extrude this. Okay, and now we're gonna subdivide everything. So that's so much geometry. There's no need for that. And we're going to add now a decimate modifier, 0.1, and click enter. And now you see, apply it. And now look at this. We have the same thing, but with way less geometry, and the shape is the same. So when you have complex shapes and you have added a lot of detail, you can use the decimate modifier and you can add less geometry, remove geometry essentially, and make the object take less space. Okay, edge split. Edge split is basically just splits all the edges. It doesn't really matter. So you like add now, if you go edit mode, it just basically disconnects all the object's edges. It's like similar to what happens when you UV unwrap something. I'm not sure why you would do this here. Maybe for an animation, if you want like a cube to fold out, like from a paper, and you want to make an animation of a paper folding into a cube or another shape, an origami or whatever. Maybe it's useful for that. I haven't found a use for this, but it's good to know what it does. Next one, we've got the mask modifier. Now, the mask modifier is a complicated one. I'm going to leave it till last. Let's go over the rest of the ones. So mirror modifier basically mirrors the object compared to an axis. So let's say that we have this object and I want to make this smaller and extrude it here. So here you see it extruded on the other side as well, because we have selected the x-axis. Now let's deselect this and select the y-axis. Here, as you can see, nothing happens because on the y-axis it is already mirrored. Let's go the z-axis, still nothing. So I'm gonna add more stuff. So let's go here and here. Now, if I select the y-axis, you see it is mirroring the y-axis, and the z-axis is mirroring the z-axis. Now, what you need to do more is you can click the bisect. And what that does is basically it doesn't duplicate both geometry. So if I don't click bisect and apply the modifier and I go into edit mode, you'll see that here we have essentially the geometry twice, which is pretty terrible. So what we do is when we have the modifier, we click bisect, and it basically keeps only one of the geometries. And when you flip it, it keeps the other one. So you either mirror it by one side or the other. So if you want to mirror it by one side, let's say I want to mirror the downside on the upper side. I don't know why you would want that, but anyway. So you click Z-axis and flip, and if you bisect it, it's going to cut off the piece that extrudes. So this is the mirror modifier. Very, very, very useful modifier. You should always use it when making shapes that are identical on both sides. It will save you an amazing amount of time. Okay. Next modifier, we've got the multi-resolution. This is a kind of advanced modifier, but what it does essentially is it allows you to increase, separately increase the subdivision of your model and keep working on it on different levels. So if you click here, subdivide 1, 2, 3, 4 times, let's say. Now up here you can select which level of subdivision you can view. So let's say I want to sculpt this. Okay, so I'm sculpting this, but because it has a lot of geometry now due to the subdivision, I don't like it. So what I can do is select the sculpt and say I only want this to be subdivided once right now. So I can like move the vertices separately. See? And the same goes for everything else. You like levels viewport. So if you're like in object mode here, you can be like, okay, let me see the object in just one subdivision to see what's up with the geometry. And okay, I saw, now I'm back to 4. So you can keep this dynamic, and it also works better because it's it puts way less stress on your device while you're working with multi-resolution. But it's a kind of more advanced of a tool, so I wouldn't recommend using it in the beginning. So let's get rid of this. Next modifier, Remesh. Remesh basically remakes the object from scratch with in different ways. So let's just make this object again a little bit more complicated, like this and this and this, like I don't know, just random shapes. Okay, so we made this shape. Let's remake it. And you can also do it when like there's a lot of geometry. Okay, so now let's do the remesh. Remesh is going to remake it with less geometry depending on what you choose. So voxel size, the smaller we make this, the more detail it's going to have. So let's see, 0.01 is going to look pretty much the same as the original object. Now we go with blocks. You can make this as blocks. Now here it's already blocks, so it doesn't make a difference. But if it was like a human shape, you can make it with blocks and basically make it out of blocks. So it will be like a Minecraft character or something. And smooth, it just makes it in a smooth way. You can select how much. And then sharp basically makes it identical, just with different geometry. Sometimes it keeps the same geometry. It depends. So now if we apply this, let's go into object mode and apply this. And hit the object mode. See, it added way more geometry, like it changes it. So it remesh just remakes the object with different ways. Next we have the screw modifier, and if we use it on this one, you'll see it's gonna mess it up. It basically makes your object into a screw, but the way it does it is it extrudes vertices. So here it looks messed up. So even if we like make it higher, you see it looks like a screw, but the geometry is all messed up inside because it's it extrudes most vertices. So the better way to use the screw modifier is to delete all this. Let's add a plane. Let's add a plane and go into object mode. Let's delete everything and just keep one vertice. So now let's put it in the middle. Okay, so now let's take this vertice Hold on. I'm just screwing around. Okay, let's take this vertex now. Let's extrude it and make a random shape. Let's make this shape here. Okay, so now what you can do with this is let's set the origin geometry. No, origin to 3D cursor. Let's put it there. Okay, so now if we add the screw modifier, you see, what's that? It almost made a vase, and you can select the degrees it works, so you can make like a half thing or whatever. But this is a good way to make like glasses and all that kind of stuff. And you can merge it so it can connect the vertices, the hanging vertices. But let's look at another cool thing that you can do. Let's say you want to make a boat. So let's just let's delete everything again. Let's take this one vertex, put it like here, and now start extruding. So like we'll make a boat like this, and then the back of the boat like this. Okay, so you have this, and now you're gonna add a screw modifier this side. There we go. Alright, so now you see, hit the merge, and now you see you are making a boat. And when you apply this, not in object mode, you apply this, have your boat. Let's rotate it here, and you have the undercarriage of the boat. And you can just select all the here, close it up, maybe like make it a little smaller, extrude it downwards, and there you go. There's your boat. Shape flat, and you have a boat. So it's a cool way to make shapes like this. But you can do it for many things. Like you have a railing on a balcony or something. You want it to curve around a balcony. You just add a screw modifier to this geometry you made, and you just curve it around. It's a very useful modifier, but it's slightly difficult to use sometimes. Okay, next modifier. We have the skin modifier. The skin modifier is well, it's a pretty complicated one to use. What it basically does is, see if I put it here, skin. What it basically does is it takes all the edges and makes new mesh from the edges around the object. It's kind of hard to explain, but you get this result from a cube, for instance. If we added like a sphere and we added the skin modifier, you see my PC is probably gonna crash, but if it doesn't crash, you see that it takes all the faces and just messes them up. So it's a pretty weird modifier to use. I haven't found a real use for it yet, so I would recommend staying away from it. Solidify. Well, let's add it and get rid of one face so we can see what Solidify does. Delete the face. Okay, so what Solidify does, it basically makes the object hollow and adds thickness to the walls. So you can select how thick the walls will be and whether it will go inwards or outwards. And the offset is by how much you want it to deviate from the original object. You can click here to fill the rim so it can print if it's for printing, and you don't need to mess with anything else. This basically covers everything. Okay, get rid of this. No. Cube. Next modifier. Subdivision surface, my favorite. It basically just adds more geometry to the thing, to your object. You can click simple to keep the shape and only add geometry, or Catmull-Clark, which basically makes it like smoother overall while adding more geometry. You can select how much more geometry. Nice. And what you can do before applying this is you can go into edit mode, and you see the original shape is here. So you can modify the original shape whilst you're doing the subdivision surface before you apply it. This is useful many times. So now we can add like another loop cut here to make the upper part sharper, like this, and like maybe one of these shapes like that, and add another one. Alright, so you make this weird thing, and now you apply it. And now it's a new, it's a whole, only the new mesh, subdivided mesh. Okay, so this is very useful. Just don't go overboard because the memory is going to start dying. Then we've got Triangulate. Very simple. This is usually done for game engines. So you click Triangulate, you just apply, and now all the squares have been divided up into triangles. Basically all game engines use triangles, they don't use squares. So you make a geometry, you make something like a mesh, a character, it's in squares most of the time, and you want to port it into the game engine. Now usually once you export it, it already does this on its own, but you can do it here so you can mess with the triangles a little bit better before you add your character to the game engine. Okay, so the last few ones is volume to mesh. Now to make volume to mesh we need to do something first. So let's put this to the side. Let's add a volume, an empty volume, and on the volume, select the volume, we're going to add mesh to volume and select the cube, for instance. Now if we hide the cube, you'll see there is like a mesh, like a cloud being made. This is the volume. You can select how dense it is and how much the edges are sharp. Okay, so let's just keep it like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add another shape, like let's say a cube again. Go to the volume, and we're going to add a texture to the volume. Let's name it cloud and select clouds. Okay, now in the modifiers of the volume we're going to add displace and select the cloud. So now, as you can see, which is pretty cool, you have a cloud. But maybe you wanted this to be like a smoke effect on a miniature that you're going to print. So what you do now is you go to the cube and you select the generate the volume to mesh modifier and select the volume. And now it becomes a solid object. You can move it around while the modifiers are there, and you can go to the cube and apply it. And now you have this shape, which is like, this was just a random thing, but you get the point. You can make a mesh, a volume, sorry, into a mesh if you want to like print it or whatever else you want to do, like make a complex swamp with bubbles and all that. You can just make this, and it's pretty cool. Let's delete everything. Cube, add a new one. Okay, now finally we have the Weld modifier. What the Weld modifier does is, let's duplicate this, and the Weld modifier basically, well, it just welds all the objects together. So sorry, we first Control Shift and J to make this one object, and then we add the Weld modifier, and we select by how much, let's say 0.2, and we apply. So now if we go here, we'll see that these two things are not welded. The reason is we did not add a lot of leeway into the distance. So let's add more. Let's add like 2. Now you see that it welded them. Let's add 1. Still nothing because there's not a lot of geometry. But as you can see, it just welds the objects together when you complete them. Now they're one object where they were touching, and the vertices that weren't touching other vertices are not connecting. So it basically takes all the vertices that touch each other and welds them into one, and the rest is loose. So let's probably show this off better by subdividing this a couple of times, and then let's add like a cylinder like here. So we want the cylinder to weld on this object. So let's go and do weld and add 1. That's too much. Let's add 0.5. Let's add 0.1. 0.2. Okay, so as you can see, it does its best to take the vertices of the cylinder and connect them to the nearest vertices of the cube. And when there are no vertices, like there's more vertices here than there are in this square, they do not connect and they're loose inside our object. So that's the weld modifier. It's not super useful, but it's there. And now the final modifier is the wireframe, which is pretty cool because look what it does. It basically takes all the edges and makes them into physical things and deletes the rest. You can keep the original and make it on top of it, but basically this makes a frame into geometry. So you can have cool stuff. So you can be like, hey, let's make a window. I'm gonna add like 2 things here, and this is like the windowsill, and this is the downer part, and now I'm gonna be like, okay, add the wireframe, and you have like this thing here. You can make it wider, and you apply it, and you basically have the frame of a window here, only the front part, ignore the back. And then you can add like the inside of the window like this, and you can make it like glass, and you can make the other part metal, and you have a very nice window. So yeah, these are all the Generate modifiers in Blender. You can use these in combination with others, and there's really no limit to what you can do. Just play around with them until you learn them, and then you'll be able to make anything you want. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye now.